very clearly while I was being fitted for retainers that my dentist said she didn't have any models of how my teeth would look afterwards because she only had those models for white people's teeth. You know, those big mouth thingies. And that Asian people's teeth were shaped differently. And she was Asian herself, by the way, but that's not the point. When my dad and I got to the car, I told him that I was really glad at least I had white person eyes. He asked if I thought that his eyes with the canthal fold were ugly, and it took a second before I said no, that I was only talking about my own eyes. He didn't say anything back, but the rest of the car ride was really uncomfortable. So earlier this year, 2 years ago, holy shit, I forgot how time works. So 2 years ago, I almost got punched at a grocery store by a man who yelled something along the lines of "Get out of here, coronavirus" at me. Anyways, it's API Heritage Month, and I want to add my voice to one of the dozens talking about the model minority myth to discuss something I haven't really seen anyone else mention. And I don't mean this as a dig at anyone. I can only do this because people more brilliant and insightful than I have stuck their neck out to even get me to this point. And a lot of their ideas are ones that I would never have considered. All of that being said, what I want to talk about is how the model minority myth places the onus of solving racism on individuals and why this doesn't work. So there's a good reason that a lot of various Pan-Asian people decided on the API or AAPI umbrella. That's Asian Pacific Islander or Asian and Pacific Islander, API or AAPI. It's kind of like how LGBT plus and queer are umbrella terms for people who aren't cisgender or straight or perisex. There's power in numbers, and there are some aspects of API culture that I don't think the West shares. And by West, I mean North America and Western Europe. My knowledge of South America and Eastern Europe are shamefully lacking. For example, staying closer to your parents and having multiple generations living in the same house isn't considered shameful to many of us. In fact, I lost an argument with my mother to go to a university several hundred miles away from home because she wanted me close by. She won by offering me free laundry, so just pro tip to all the Asian parents out there. Large numbers means more solidarity, more power, and a closer community. You know, the phrase, "it takes a village to raise a child." The bigger village, the more people you have to help with childcare. And I'm getting off topic. So where this comes apart is when Asian people are considered a monolith, any one person can easily be assumed to represent the rest. And this is ridiculous, of course. We've all got different opinions and different things that we want, and like even when it comes to the definition of being Asian, we're not going to agree. To go back to the college thing I brought up earlier, I see people bring up test scores all the time as a measure of success without bringing up the frankly obscene correlation between family income and test scores. You know, Asians who are able to get into more prestigious colleges and universities by taking non-stop preparatory classes that are completely inaccessible to people who don't have the means to do that isn't actually a sign that Asian people as a whole are doing better than other demographics. It just means that the Asians who have the resources to succeed do, and obviously there are going to be outliers. I'm not saying there aren't. I'm just not going to pretend that middle-class East Asian culture, which I grew up in, didn't play a huge role in my experiences. Like, as far back as I can remember, I have lived in areas with a large Chinese, Korean, and Japanese population. When I went to college, University of California, Santa Cruz, let's go wild in the comments. Not a single one of my Asian American classmates had parents who worked in, say, restaurants or laundromats, because you don't have the time to develop a well-rounded admissions profile when you have to supplement your parents' shoestring budget. And I'm not trying to negate the hard work and sacrifices that my parents and the parents of my peers made. Immigrating from anywhere is a really hard experience. I'm just gonna be blunt here though. There aren't a lot of poor kids in like Indonesia or China who go to college or graduate school in the US. That's not to say there are none, but while there are some shared elements to the AAPI immigrant experience, there are just as many ways that our experiences are separate. And you'll notice I said Korean, Chinese, and Japanese earlier, and that's because I think East Asians and South Asians, like Indians and Pakistanis, and Pacific Islanders like Samoans and Filipinos, also have hugely different experiences. Setting aside inter-community hatred, because oh boy, do I not have the time to deal with the extensive history of why large numbers of Japanese, Korean, and Chinese people hate each other. A lot of it comes down to skin color, which is very difficult to explain to Americans because it doesn't have anything to do with race. It has to do with class. The paler you are, the more likely you are to be upper class, because only the lower class have to work in the sun, and therefore only the lower class tan, and just saying that makes me feel weird. So I don't think the majority of people who believe in the model minority myth are doing that with intentional malice. I know it's easier to reduce the world to like people who work hard and people who don't, and it's comforting because the idea of a just world is comforting. It's comforting to me too, and I find myself believing it more often than I'd like. But the idea of Asian success being based on a very specific kind of person means that all this does is make racism a problem of the individuals who don't fit this mold, when it's really a systemic problem. And yes, I know that systems and societies are just large numbers of individuals, but individualizing a problem, making the idea of racial equality look like those individuals, is never going to work, because by definition, not everyone can look like that. The idea that anyone can look like that does not mean everyone can look like that. And only by putting the responsibility of solving racism on society, on everyone who does and does not look like a certain kind of person, is going to work. And I know I'm simplifying it. It's a continuous process. Unlearning racism isn't a thing that ever actually has an end point. It's just a continuous system of educating yourself. And it's uncomfortable to think about it this way. It's uncomfortable to think about it in a systemic or societal way because our culture is so individualized. When society prizes the success of the individual and doesn't put a lot of stock in the holistic success of a demographic, no matter what that demographic is, that's when things like the model minority myth are going to come up. And I'm not going to pretend like this hasn't helped me on an individual level. I have leveraged my race to get out of situations that somebody who's white or black or South Asian wouldn't have gotten out of. I've also leveraged the fact that I'm a woman to get out of situations that someone who's a cis man or transgender wouldn't have gotten out of. But these are individual times. I have played on societal expectations that I was boxed into, and making a box more comfortable doesn't mean I'm not still trapped in it. So, 2 years ago, I almost got punched in the face at a grocery store by a man who yelled something along the lines of, "Get out of here, coronavirus." And I choose to see this as an overall positive experience because the reason he didn't punch me is because another total random stranger, this big dude I've never seen before in my life, stood between us and grabbed his arm and kept him from getting close to me. And this wispy old lady led me away and took me around the store asking what I wanted to get and putting them in her cart while her son, who I think was pretty big, I'm very small, he stood guard behind us. And when we got to the front, the employees were quick to assure me that the guy who tried to hit me was never welcome back. And the next day, actually, an employee at McDonald's recognized me and comped my Shamrock Shake. You know, if I could go back in time, I would tell my child self that for every person who sees me as an other, there's 5 at least people who will see me as another member of the community. I would tell me that my eyes are beautiful because they're my eyes, not because they look more white. That I would tell myself to love myself enough to tell my parents that I love the way they look too, because they made me look the way that I do. And I can't go back and say this, but I can try to love myself enough now, no matter how my teeth look. And I'm gonna try to. So, happy API Heritage Month, everyone. And I'm gonna try to have a good one too.